How do you compare to your fellow Americans when it comes to how much money you're bringing in every year? Well, we're going to dive into exactly that. In this video, I'm going to break down the average income for Americans in different age categories to show the average progression of income in our country and what you can expect. And I'm also going to share my thoughts on how I think you can exceed these averages and maximize the amount of money that you're bringing in. Now, this is definitely a channel that focuses on personal finance and building wealth. But we actually have not talked a ton about income and how you can increase it. I tend to spend a lot more time talking about saving and investing, but we definitely cannot leave out income, as that's going to be the tool that will allow you to actually invest your money and build wealth. Now, the reason I talk about saving and investing instead of focusing on the income aspect of personal finance is because I believe that we as Americans are a little bit too hyper focused on salary and how much money we're making. To illustrate this, think of a time when someone you know was describing someone who they thought was financially successful. How did they phrase that exactly? Well, the odds are they said something along the lines of, they make this much money. Or when they're describing their own aspirations, their goals will be something like, oh, I would just love to make this much money per year. And while it's definitely good to work to maximize your income, the average American would be much better off if instead of focusing on how much money they make, they instead focus on how much money they have. Because even if you make $1 million per year and you spend it all, you're still broke. It really only matters if you save and invest an appropriate amount. That being said, income is still important because it turns out it's really hard to invest your money if you don't have any money. So we still need to talk about it on this channel. But before we dive any deeper, make sure you hit that subscribe button so that you can stay tuned on my latest videos. I would really appreciate it. So thanks. So let's officially get started with the younger end of the spectrum and start with our 20 to 24-year-olds. Now, this is probably not the stage of your life where you're going to be rolling in it and making the big bucks. I remember when I was in high school, I thought I would graduate from college and immediately start making $100,000 a year, which talk about being disconnected from reality. When you're in your early 20s, your main focus should be finding a career that will allow you to make a good income, and hopefully it's also something that you do enjoy. And for a lot of people, they might do that by going to college, but it could also be something else like going to trade school or jumping right into the workforce to gain experience in a certain industry. For people who do decide to go to college, I think a lot more college students need to look at their education as an investment. It's not necessarily a place that you should go to chase your passion. I'm not saying passions are bad. You should 100% pursue what you love. But when it comes to paying a lot of money for a degree, make sure you study something that will allow you to make money and then pursue any passions or hobbies you have on the side. And I'm also not saying to study something you hate. You just have to find the middle ground between a career that you'll actually like and also a career that will give you a good chance of landing a good job after you're done with school. But overall, my advice for people in this age group would be to not necessarily be focused on how much money they're making in the moment, but instead getting on the track for a career path that will allow them to have a good income in the future. But that being said, let's look at the actual numbers. The average salary for people between the ages of 20 and 24 is a little over $38,000 a year, which comes out to an hourly rate of $18.43. And to me, this honestly seems like it checks out. A lot of people in this age range are probably still in school or are still in the process of figuring out what they want to do with their life, meaning that they're working part-time or they're working lower paying jobs on the side while they go to school. And those in that age range who have started their full-time career are likely still in entry-level jobs. So while their pay probably is pretty decent compared to what they were used to, it's still not going to be as high as some of the later age groups. And while I do think $38,000 for this age specifically isn't bad, don't get me wrong, because $38,000 a year is going to be pretty hard to live on in most areas of the country. The good news is that for degrees that are in demand, it's very attainable to find an entry-level job that pays much more than this. For example, according to ZipRecruiter, the average entry-level position for an engineer will pay anywhere from $51,000 $64,500 per year to $78,500 per year, which is much higher than the average that we just talked about. And that's just one example. But if you pick the right skill and you apply yourself, it should be very doable to eventually exceed the average income early in your 20s. All right, and we're moving on up. You're getting to the next stage of your life, which is going to be your late 20s and your early 30s, ages 25 to 34 to be more specific. Now, this one is kind of tough to talk about from a general perspective just because this stage of life is going to vary a lot from person to person. Some people in this age range might still be in the process of going to school and getting qualified, but for the most part, there's also a lot of people who ended up going to college who have since graduated and are a few years into their career. And this age range is also tough to discuss as a generality because you'll also probably find that your working situation when you're 25 changes a lot by the time you turn 34. Your 20s are for trying new things, figuring out exactly what you want to do with your career, and then getting focused so that you can start progressing in that career at a good rate. So I just wanted to jump into those couple caveats before we get into the numbers because, again, it's going to vary a lot person to person and may even vary for yourself within this range. The average annual income for people aged 25 to 34 is over $52,000 a year, which comes out to an hourly pay of $25.45. And immediately, I'm actually really happy to see that the average has increased so much from our previous group. It shows that people are doing a good job of moving into their full-time job market and progressing and increasing their earning potential. Now, if you're making the average at this point and you are living alone, money is probably going to feel a little bit tight, especially with the sharp increase in housing prices over the last few years. While $52,000 is respectable for someone in their 20s, there are still career paths that will allow you to exceed this fairly early on. Again, that's why it's so important to research college majors and career paths that have a high return on investment. And keep in mind that most colleges will actually post their placement statistics that will include the average salary for entry-level jobs for people who just left or graduated from that class. So if you're not looking at those reports before you're selecting your school or your major, you need to do that immediately. And you also need to hit that subscribe button. Again, I would really appreciate it. Thanks so much. Now let's move on to the 35 to 44-year-olds. And in this age group, we see another jump in salary, with the average coming in at a little over $63,000, which is an hourly pay of $30.58. Now, my comments and feedback here are very similar to what we've already talked about in this video, but I feel like there's a lot of people in this age group who feel discouraged, they feel like they're behind, and they feel like it's too late for them to make a career change to get into a higher paying industry. And that's just not the case. If you're 35 years old, you could still have 75% of your working life ahead of you. That's a really long time to stay in a job you don't like just because you think it's too late for you to start over. And this is especially true today. There are so many opportunities to educate yourself and qualify yourself in a lot of relevant skills like software development or trades, and it's also common for a lot of adults to go back to school. So I don't have any extra advice here other than to give you a little bit of hope if you feel like this is the scenario that you're in. Even though you're not as young as most people who are starting college today, you're still young in the grand scheme of things. And again, you still have a lot of time to work. So you should pursue something that you enjoy. And you have a lot of potential to keep increasing your income throughout your life. And the reason I want to make sure that comes across super clearly is because for the rest of the video, you're going to see that there is a major stagnation when it comes to the amount that pay increases as people get older. Up until now, we've seen a fair amount of growth, but we're going to see that growth stop. The median income will increase very minimally, but for most people, this point right now from 35 to 44 is going to be the peak or very close to the peak. And that makes me sad because like I said, you likely still have 3/4 of your working life left, and that's a long time to stay in the same place financially. And if pay was stagnating because people felt content, they felt like they were earning enough to support the dream lifestyle that they had, then I would be okay with that. If people felt like they had more than enough and that's why they weren't pursuing higher paying jobs. But when I look at the statistics on the median income, I can't help but think that it would be very hard to live off of these averages alone. Don't get me wrong, it's very possible to live on $63,000 a year, but it will get tight, especially if you have dependents that rely on you. To show this stagnation in income growth, let's look at the data for those that are older than 45. For those aged 45 to 54, the median annual income is $64,400 $6,428. For ages 55 to 64, we actually see a slight decrease in the average or median salary as it drops down to $63,366. And for those ages 65 plus, we see the average income drop even further to $54,184 per year, which actually makes sense because at that stage, people are starting to retire and they're not working as much. If it's not obvious to you by now, I'm very passionate about picking a career field that will allow you a lot of opportunity for advancement and will allow you to earn well beyond the average incomes that we just discussed. But why is that? Why exactly is it so important that we maximize our income, especially if we have a low cost lifestyle or we are not very materialistic? My biggest concern is that when I look at these average salaries for Americans, I do not see a lot of room for buffer there. And I definitely don't see any budget for savings or investing. I think it's very possible to live on these average salaries in a lot of the US, but I do think it's very hard to do that and set money aside for investing every single month. Is it impossible? Of course not, but it is going to require a large amount of planning and dedication. When we consider taxes, housing expenses, groceries, travel expenses, insurance, etc., I feel like I personally would have a really hard time making it work on $60,000 a year while also setting aside 15 to 20% of my pay towards retirement. I'm sure I could outline a budget and make it work, but it would be hard. So while I do think that a lot of people could improve their finances by setting a budget and working on spending less money and contributing more money towards investments, a lot of people could also make their financial situation a lot easier by finding a way to improve their income and create more buffer at the end of the month. And trust me, I know, getting on here and just telling people to make more money is a lot easier said than done. And this is not going to be an overnight process. It's going to take time for you to get trained, get established in your career, and to get to the phase where you're earning more money. But it's important that we talk about income and how we compare to the rest of the country to make sure that we're on track to reevaluate and to maximize our earning potential as much as possible. And that's going to do it for this video. Let me know down in the comments, did you like this video? Is there anything you disagree with this video? Let me know. Make sure you hit that subscribe button, make sure you hit that like button, and we'll see you in the next one. Thanks.